How are you? Thank you. Thank you for being here this evening. Nice to meet everybody.
It's great to be here.
Yes, yes. So my name is Bernita Bradley, for all of those who are out there in the world. I am from Detroit, Michigan, and I'm the owner of the Village and Outreach Recruitment and Engagement Organization. Um, yes, yes. So I have some wonderful guests here who I'm just really learning about myself. So I'm really excited about this conversation. I'm excited to learn more about what you do across this world for communities and in communities. Of course, our topic is how communities build entrepreneurs. I'm a social entrepreneur, and I know that there's a lot of people who are what we consider more like me, grassroots, boots on the ground, and they're trying to figure out like, how do we stay relevant in the future, and how do we make sure that young people understand their path moving forward to stay relevant, especially in some of our most hardest hit communities where people are saying there's jobs available, right? But where do the jobs actually land people, and how are people developing their own ideas, and how community helps make that happen. So I'm here with, forgive me if I mess up anybody's name, please forgive me. Okay, so Rocio. Rocio is the CEO of CORFO at CORFO from Chile. Did I say that right, Rocio?
Perfect.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Then I have Brian Requarth, who is from Latitude. He's the co-founder of Latitude, so welcome, Brian.
Thank you.
Then I have Fivang. Did I say that right?
It's P-Van, but it's okay.
Fine. I want to get it right. I want to get it right. Who is the chairwoman for the Vietnam Angel Network. And then I have Nick Smoot, who is the Innovation Collective, who's from the Innovation Collective. And so hopefully I got all of those together. So I'd love to go just around and just introduce yourselves really briefly and tell people what you do. So I'll start with Fivang.
So hello everyone. I run 3 different communities here in the ASEAN. The first is a project called Project 844 under the Ministry of Science and Technology of Vietnam, and we built a startup and innovation ecosystem for Vietnam. So that's one community. The second is the ASEAN Business Angel Alliance Network. So we have about 5,000 members of angel investors around the 10 ASEAN countries, supporting and building the startup ecosystem for the ASEAN as a whole. And lastly, I'm also a social innovator. So I run a community of young social innovators in Vietnam for kids from 8 to 18 years old, 3 years in a row. And we've got wonderful, excellent social innovators here for the past 3 years. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. And then I'll just go to Nick, who's up under me on the screen. Yes.
Yeah, it's nice to meet everybody. I'm with Innovation Collective. I'm the founder and CEO, and we're a very different grassroots approach to building ecosystems. I started the first one without any permission or funding from the government at all, and started it just was a bunch of entrepreneurs getting together. I was the lead, and we've really established over a 4-year period in that community this model of using curiosity and a very clear, distinct pathway that has about 70 events per year as this rhythm to become a social infrastructure in a community that starts to replace where the citizens put their energy. So a lot of them will go out to bars or karaoke or do other fun things, quote unquote fun. And we flipped it to where it was more fun to talk about what you dream about, how to learn new skills, build companies, and then integrate that into a realignment of services in any community. And now we work across the country and do some international work with the model that we call Better. And it helps really realign the vision of a region and geography and help heal their energy drain, might we say, where people are putting their eyes everywhere else. It's super fun, but that's what we do.
I like that you said without permission of government, right? Like just kind of went in there and did what you're gonna do, right? Based on what the people need. So
we jokingly, I was gonna say, we jokingly say this is not Footloose. If you've ever seen the movie, like you can dance if you want it. Like,
okay, I like that. I like that. Brian, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Bernita, thanks a lot for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. So I'm from California, but I spent the last 15 years living in Latin America. I was a struggling entrepreneur in Brazil for many years. Wasn't much of an ecosystem. I was finally able to raise significant venture capital. We built a very large tech company, which we sold last year in the second largest transaction in Brazil, in tech transaction. And so I've been spending the last several years looking at building communities of startup founders, connecting the top entrepreneurs in the region to really elevate the next generation of entrepreneurs and connecting not just Brazil, but the entire region of Latin America. So that's been my focus, and that's what I'm planning on dedicating the next decade to. So I'm excited to learn from all of you and the best practices of whether it's in Vietnam, in the States, in Detroit, where we can kind of come together and try to elevate the next generation of entrepreneurs by leveraging community at a center point of what we're doing. So it's a pleasure to be here. And that's Latitude, the name of the organization.
Yes, thank you, thank you. Rocio.
It's an honor to be here with you guys. It's like 7 a.m. or 7 p.m. already in Chile, so it's late, it's dark because it's winter. And we are government. We are the opposite to Nick because we depend 100% of the Chilean Economic Development Agency. We have a budget of around $30 million per year to fund innovation projects, but we are always focused in tech innovation, right? So it doesn't matter the size of the company. Of course, we work a lot with startups, but the main focus for us is to add value to our economy, because in Latin America, we basically depend on natural resources that we don't add too much value to that. And that's a big problem, right? Because we have a lot of social and environmental externalities related to that. So our purpose is to increase the value of our entire economy and to create social and environmental impact too. And in terms of that, I truly believe that building communities is the main asset that you can create, because everything is for a purpose, right? Everything has to be focused on the people. You have to change the mindset. In US, for example, you already have the entrepreneurial mindset, you already have the communities, but in Latin America, everything is super split. And nobody connects with each other. So for us, the main challenge that you have to start to build, it's about connections. It's about starting to connect with each other. And that's the reason why for us, even when we had the budget to fund innovation projects, the main purpose for us is to change the Chilean mindset, is to connect entrepreneurs with corporations with a purpose to change the economy, basically.
Yeah, Rocio, so I'll start back with you. So I looked at some of your videos and you spoke a lot about like bridging the gap, like bridging the economical gap. And I know you said like in the United States, we have more connectivity, right? But we also have those gaps that exist when we have communities that are, have real impoverished communities, but then our downtown areas have the allocation of funding. Like, how do you see cities bridging that gap to make sure that the economical system thrives for everybody?
Yeah, it's hard, right? And when you have our country has just 19 million people, so it's not that big, and we have a very thin country, right? That is split in different territories, and I truly believe that you have to work together for a purpose, right? When you're working with different kind of economies, you have to work together with universities, with the startups, large corporations, VCs, CVCs, but with a purpose in common, right? And I truly believe that the new economies are highly related with, highly correlated with social development, all the GSD goals, for example, but the way of creating the new economy, I truly believe that it has to be based on geographically based economies, right? Connecting the different actors, different players, but with a purpose in common. It's not just anymore about economical impact, it's thinking about our society and the environment. And I truly believe that the new economy is very focused in sustainability too, but we have to work together for a purpose. And that's the only way to close the gap.
Yeah, that purpose is very key. So Fivane, you were really speaking about startups, and when you're talking about working together, how do you, I hear you saying a whole lot about like these angel funds and angel partners, right? Like how do you get, was talking about, because it gets hard when someone's trying to hold on to what they have and they're afraid to step out and invest in somebody else. How do you do that in communities?
So first of all, angel investment is already part of the ecosystem of any startup ecosystem. So it has to be that piece that has to be existing in order to complete the ecosystem as a whole. So from the government point of view, because I advise to the government, we basically come out and the government becomes also a co-founder of the angel investment community of Vietnam. So we have the government as a stakeholder, and then we have some of the largest entrepreneur network in Vietnam to be a co-founder of the community. And then we have all the various successful entrepreneurs from the ecosystem to be part of it as well. So that's how we start, just to get everyone behind the scenes to basically come out and network everyone together and create that attraction for everyone to have trust and to be able to connect to the different ecosystem stakeholders. And that's the first value that we add to the network to make everyone to join. And then after that, we place a lot of importance in connecting with other countries around us as a region. So we basically look for angel associations around the ASEAN and basically just make a call and say, okay, let's work together. And the past 3 years, we have done that unofficially as just an alliance. And last February, we have officially launched the ASEAN Business Angel Alliance Network as a social enterprise in Singapore, to bring everyone in the region together and create a lot of cross-border investment, cross-border support, so that the entrepreneurs from different countries can learn from each other, learn from other investors, and learn and be able to use that foundation to also expand their businesses around the region.
Yeah. Wow, wow, wow. Nick, I saw your head shaking a lot. You want to say anything about that? Like you were agreeing a whole lot.
No, it's funny. I love how, so someone made the comment, I think it was Rocio, about how like teaching people to think more entrepreneurial. And often in the US, like we forget that this country was built by a bunch of people who wouldn't follow the rules, like literally. And so it's kind of like ingrained in the ethos of a lot of the American culture of like, yeah, nice try. We left your country. We're like all the people who wouldn't like deal with it. And we're going to start a different experiment over here. And yet how important it is to be systematic and surgical to create the scalable approach. And what you were talking about is breaking down those borders, because even in the United States, so we work all across the country, we're in all 4 corners of the country, and we have the worst expansion plan ever. Like we're trying to go as far away as we could. But the one thing that happens in every community is people get so focused, even if they're having success on their little corner of the world, and they forget what's happening 45 minutes down the road. And it just drives me crazy. Absolutely crazy.
Or how it impacts you, right? Like how what's happening over there is going to impact you and your community, right?
Yeah, and it's we jokingly say like we come in from the outside and get to help build a really big tent, because some people are like, well, you're going to replace the co-working space in town because we build work live spaces. But no, we won't replace it. Actually, we'll like help it become more full. And people forget you can have a big tent and have outside eyes to be consistent and repeatable. And I love what you're saying about having a process so that people can influence each other from cross borders. It's incredibly powerful, just because in the US, maybe we're the rebels who built that mindset in some ways. But we still have very similar problems with our own stupidity where we get in our own way.
Brian, thank you for that, Brian. So venture capital. Let's discuss a little bit about venture capital. Like, how do we get that type of capital into communities, and how do we get people to trust that what people see as common community members are worth the capital to invest in. You're on mute, Brian. That's okay.
Classic. Venture capital. I mean, it's an interesting industry, right? And kind of by default, it's very kind of like protected, and it's kind of only goes to a few people. And trying to democratize more access is a big challenge for particularly a region like Latin America. I've been living for almost 2 decades in Latin America, and there's been almost a nuclear winter of no activity from global investors. So I think that what happens is you start developing a virtuous cycle where you have some success stories. So if you see a success story in Detroit, it's going to attract more people to come to that area. If you see something in Sao Paulo, the same thing happens. So I would say, just kind of piggybacking a little bit of the other comments, the way startup ecosystems work is that there's a power law dynamic that applies. So what that means is that there's a few key entrepreneurs, usually leaders of a community, and they have the most impact on the ecosystem development. And it's important to identify who those folks are and help them amplify their efforts by connecting them with each other and to others within the ecosystem. And so those leaders, they become role models for people. I was sitting in Bogota, Colombia when I first started, and there was literally no tech role models, right? There was no venture-backed companies. And so not having that was very difficult for me. And so I had to look to the US or other places. But eventually I became more of a role model. And then, I have a responsibility to demonstrate kind of those norms and behaviors and attitudes of the startup community over the long term. And by giving them visibility, kind of their virtues, and I say virtues because that's more behaviors rather than, values, which is a little bit more aspirational. So whether the virtues are transparency, fairness, giving first, need to propagate those through the entire ecosystem, build trust, and that increases network connectivity and overall value. And that should attract more capital and more interest in the local ecosystem. So it's an easy thing to say, and it's a hard thing to do. But I think that all of us are working in our local ecosystem, whether it's Chile, Vietnam, throughout the US, and that's kind of, I think we have a shared aligned goal there.
Yeah.
Could I add something in on the venture?
Go ahead, Nick.
I was going to say on the venture capital piece, something we've discovered, because we work a lot on the Erie Canal, and then we've done some work in Aruba a little bit, some other kind of international spots. And there's this one differentiator that is it's completely like stolen from Techstars and Y Combinator, like, to be quite frank, and venture capital funds. So the golden goose is getting consistent deal flow that's industry specific at a lower valuation and high quality. Like if you're a fund, that's what you want. PE, VC, like have consistency. So they'll have people in the funds that they hire that are specifically trained in specific disciplines to look for specific things, and they build specific relationships. So like specificity. And often when we think about building startup ecosystems, we go about it with this idea of like, well, let's be San Francisco. That's stupid, period. Like, you're dumb. Like, don't do that. Instead, understand that San Francisco was funded by the US government to build crazy tech to fight wars. That's why San Francisco has all the scientists and the engineers and the research, and it was overfunded. So they all hung out together and they made black magic to like come up with these crazy technologies that changed the world. And then the clusters talent, common language, deal flow consistency, startups to be able to cluster around a vertical. If you come there and move there and you lose a job, you can jump to another company that's similar. But most importantly, it helps the capital markets identify a geography and a people group that they can rally behind something. And most people don't care what they work on. Hard stop. Most people care about, do I get to work with people I like? Do I get to use skills that I think are authentic to me? And do I get to build something that adds value to this world? And so if you can find a vertical to be like, let's build this town around this X, it's a game changer for unlocking venture capital and corporate research and development funds and corporate development funds to look at a geography, and the corporate philanthropy dollars to go into science fairs that are now about their vertical. Like it's crazy. We have a small town of like 30,000 people. where we're doing science fairs around aging, and AARP is our partner, the world's largest aging institution. So there's like, it's a game changer for unlocking capital that's just stolen from Y Combinator and Techstars. I was going to throw that in there because I think it's super important. That's my opinion.
Yeah. So when we're talking about people, though, let's get down to the community level a little bit more. When you talk about young people who don't know anything you're talking about, right? Like they are like, I have this innovative idea and I feel like I can save the world, right? and they're looking for these opportunities, and they're looking for people in their community. Like you said, the networking, knowing who the big three are, knowing who these people are that they go to. How do these people get recognized, as well as how do they stay stick-to-itive? Because the future is going to depend on their ideas evolving, right, and growing. Like they need that opportunity, but how do we make sure they get those opportunities? Anybody?
I would just like to complement in terms of venture capital that we have a lot, we don't have too many venture capital here in Latin America. Unfortunately, maybe Brazil is the exception, but we are looking for a lot of corporate venture capital. There are traditional companies that they depend on natural resources mainly, and they know that they have a limited time life. And we're working a lot with them, creating connections, turning their challenges into opportunities to the ecosystem. So I, I I think we have to add to the conversation not just the talent of entrepreneur young people, but also the traditional companies that maybe have more than 50-year-old, the CEOs, right? And working together, because you have to mix tradition, right, with new trends. We have to, at least in developing countries, we cannot abandon. It's not separate ways. You have to work together. So I would like to add just that, because I truly believe that we cannot just talk about an ecosystem if you're talking just with entrepreneurs. We have to work together.
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead, Bob.
So I like to comment on that human resources angle of the ecosystem. And in Vietnam, we're only a 5-year-old ecosystem. And when we started, the government comes out and there's a lot of propaganda about being a startup and being a unicorn overnight. So you have this huge amount of, young people, students going to pitching competitions, and we have probably about thousands of competitions a year and stuff like that. So it was fun because everyone learns to be an entrepreneur, and everyone learns how a startup works. However, we don't have any quality startups because people don't know how to start up. People don't know how to be an entrepreneur. People don't know what to do. And their professional job is basically going to startup events to pitch. And if they can pitch and they can get $50,000, they're very happy about it, and they continue to pitch. And so there are no entrepreneurs, there are professional pitchers. So what we have to do after that is we look back at the ecosystem and say, okay, we can't just build an ecosystem based on what we want to do. It has to be based on how people are equipped to evolve in time. So we go back to very young people in high school and secondary schools. And we started teaching entrepreneurship in schools and create social innovation programs for the kids to start being engaged in the ecosystem, learn what entrepreneurship is all about, learn design thinking, learn how to work as a startup, how to present. And then they do it very, very successfully. And we've got all the whole ecosystem to be connected and support, and for the past 2 years it has worked very well, and we started seeing those kids influence back to the ecosystem. The students and the startups, they look at the kids pitching and go, oh my God, they know more stuff than I do. So I think for the long term, for an ecosystem to be sustainable and to evolve, it has to start very young. It has to start from the younger generation with the skills and with the knowledge that they know about entrepreneurship.
Yeah, thank you for that. We here in Detroit, we have a whole lot of pitch competitions going on. Like we have so many different, we have these 6-week classes, these 2 months or 12-week classes where people are coming in. Then in the end, you get the pitch, right? But like it's this gap between longevity. Like, how do I make this something that carries me over, or something that I could sell off, like Brian sold their first, their first company, to make something bigger, right? Like, how do I do that, Brian?
Yeah, I think that one of the key components to a healthy ecosystem is when you have successful entrepreneurs that have had exits or success stories reach back and,
Mm,
Five on in Vietnam, this angel community, I think that I was super lucky early on. I was struggling. I was kind of navigating the process and I was a bit lost. And then early on, I found a few angel investors that had incredible experience operating companies. They'd scaled companies, they'd sold companies, they'd invested in companies, and they kind of took me under their wing. And they said, "Listen, I'm gonna, give you some, some time and put my energy into you. I want to see you succeed." And then that's when you have this virtuous cycle, when you've got the next generation lifting, the next generation up. So I think that kind of the angel investor community is absolutely plays a fundamental role, because when I started, having people involved in my business that had been there before, they were able to say, "Listen, I made this mistake already. And, there's no need for you to make the same mistake." And so I think that's when you see this healthy dynamic happening. And I think that it's the virtuous cycle is someone becomes successful. They then, have some liquidity, they reinvest in the next, generation of entrepreneurs. And then that kind of kicks off that virtuous cycle. And so I think that's a fundamental part of any, startup community.
One of the, can I throw something out about the kids piece
Yep.
too?
Yes, go ahead. Yep, take it.
Yeah, I found, because kids, similar to like a person who's a dishwasher at a restaurant, you were talking about like the people who have like a big idea. I like to kind of cluster them all together, right? Like a little kid who's never quite been burned by life and they got big dreams. And then like the dishwasher who's like maybe been super burned by life and closeted about their dreams now. Both of those people need a place where they can kind of flex and exercise with some confidence, this idea of what we call confidence in nonsense. And it's creating a consistent environment that's open to the public, consistent, like bi-monthly, monthly, where citizens are invited in and welcomed in, where it's free coffee, free whatever, and they can just share crazy ideas they have. And there's zero judgment. There's zero like, that's not real, that's not true. What does happen instead, though, is as a group, you can say, well, tell me more. What do you need to prove that this could be right or wrong? And so you start to, as a group, do like a group-based barn raising. So it's like you're building the barn together of building companies, building ideas, building dreams with zero judgment of age, race, gender, creed, socioeconomic status, like gone. And you target the schools to bring that in. And to we have principals who will let kids go and give them extra credit and let them skip class. And it's so cool because it's like twice a month. But kids will raise their hands like, I got a crazy idea. We've had old people, like I had this old man one time say he figured out a way to stop bullets. And the facilitator, I was sitting in one of them, they were like, where are we at on testing this? It was the coolest thing, because instead of telling him it's not possible, instead they're like, so what's going on here? Because this guy was like maybe a little out to lunch, but it's like maybe he did figure out how to stop bullets. So like that's such a key piece, to have that social space of, hey, what is your like crazy idea that's like so nonsensical, where you can be in the room with like a patent attorney, an investor, an engineer, a mom, a dad, a neighbor, and it's normal just to be like, I got one. That's so key for young people to feel that, flex the muscle and grow it.
Yeah, I like that. And that speaks to trust, right? So how do you build that trust between those communities, right? That where you have that one child who's like, I've been burnt and I feel like you might, my life has not been, but over here, I'm just this guru who's got it all grasped all in my head. And I really don't want to with you, but how do you build those trust in community?
How do you make it safe too? I'm curious to hear what other people hear to say about that, because like in Latin America, there's this real feel of failure, which exists everywhere. But like, I feel like growing up in the US, like there's a little bit more is there a culture of failing's okay and it's like a part of growth?
Yeah.
We'd love to hear that from, ¿qué dirán, right? In Chile, what are they going to say if if it doesn't work? So I'd love to hear the perspective of everybody else on that. Kind of adding to your question, Bernita, I think it's a great one.
We have one thing that is related with social capital, right? And social capital is related with confidence, cooperation, reciprocity. And in developing countries, South America, we don't have too much social capital, right? So how are we going to create? I was so excited hearing Nick, but I don't think it's going to work in some cultures because you don't have the mindset to do it. People don't want to trust in each other. People don't want to cooperate. When you talk about win-win relations, it's like, you can live in a bubble, right? And you can trust within your bubble, but if you want to go to another bubble, that's not going to happen, right? So how can we start breaking those bubbles to start to connect with different people? Because that is where magic happens, right? When innovation happens. And I would love to have more examples about what Nick was saying, because I truly believe it's so important. But when you don't have social capital, it's super, super hard to start doing that. And we, of course, provide those spaces, but it's the hardest thing. It's not about venture capital, entrepreneurs, or whatever. It's about people trusting each other and creating a common purpose, right?
Yes, I see in the chat, Anthea said the change of mindset. And I know Favan spoke some time ago about huge egos. Can you talk a little bit about that ego mindset here?
So in back here in Vietnam and probably across the ASEAN, our culture has been very much, you stand behind a closed door and you watch the world happening outside, and you are very careful of what you want to be part of, from an investor point of view or from an entrepreneur point of view. So there have to be a lot of media, a lot of people in the ecosystem coming out, talking about things and talking openly and sharing about success and failures. And for about 3 years, we have to constantly talk about it's okay to fail. It's okay to fail. It's okay to fail. Because the parents are basically the worst in terms of blaming their kids for being a startup founder. They go, why do you want to be a startup founder and fail a million of times? And why don't you just, go and work for the government or work for any other company? So we have to go past that mindset and create confidence and create trust from everyone in the ecosystem to support the entrepreneurs. And for that, we have been pretty, we don't know what to do for a while. And then after that, we basically, as a community of angel investors, we come up with a talk show. And the talk show has about 1 million views for each episode now, where we get the sharks, the investors, the entrepreneurs, the government, everyone in the ecosystem to be part of it and talk about how the ecosystem works, how you can find people to support you, how it's okay to fail, how one entrepreneur has failed 1 million times and now he's successful, stuff like that. So there's a lot of media that needs to be done and communication that needs to be done to build that trust in the community.
Wow.
One thing I'll share also that's worked really well for us in Latin America is we brought in extreme but F up nights where that same entrepreneur comes in and they're like, listen, you may see the story where I'm on the front cover of Forbes, but let me tell you how it was when I started out. And that it's about increasing the vulnerability. And that, I think vulnerability is at the core of building trust. And so we've been able to do that. I actually wrote a book about my journey. It's not a victory lap of the sale of my company. I shared intimate details of, struggling and running out of money and, complications and living in another country. And I think it's the examples of those, as I mentioned before, those startup leaders that set the tone for the rest of the, of the community. And so I think that's one thing that's been very effective for us. And then lastly, I'll say is really cultivating a give first mentality. It's crazy, but when you actually give first, you know, it's, you know, you'd mentioned Rocio about the, you know, the kind of like win-win type situation. But when you start from the gates and you focus on creating value for somebody else, people drop their guard and they're like, wow, like this is amazing. And then it has this amazing effect to it where they then do that with someone else. It's kind of like you're on the toll, the Golden Gate Bridge toll, and you pay the toll, and the person behind you all of a sudden gets, you know, the toll paid for them, and they're like, wow. And then maybe they pay the toll for the person behind them. So that's the kind of mentality that we need to cultivate in communities.
Cool, cool. Okay, I'll go to a couple of the audience questions. So we have one in here. And I think this may be for Brian, but let me go to the question first. How can we support founders on their mental health as a community? Wow, that's deep. Brian, I've seen you talk about that.
Yeah, so this is a great question, Anorbio. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think this is one of those taboo subjects where, you know, it's hard to be vulnerable again. Like, and what people realize, I had a mental health issue when I was building my company. I was stressed out, running out of money. I felt the burden of my, you know, and I think Nick had mentioned Brad Feld's a book or the kind of methodology at Techstars. And I think Brad's been an incredible advocate for, you know, being more open about the challenges of entrepreneurship, but it's a lonely journey. Like being an entrepreneur, it's a lonely journey. It's, you know, you're constantly dealing with all these struggles. And so I think that the power of community coming together and finding your network of people that you can build that trust layer with. I used to have something called Breakfast Club. Breakfast Club was when I was in Brazil. It was the founder of Nubank, which is one of the globally most respected, you know, neobank companies at a $30 billion valuation. We were just starting out. We had our own struggles. There was a handful of 3 or 4 other entrepreneurs. We would get together and we would share the challenges that we had. And that was able to, one, we would, you know, have the empathy of other people that were in a similar, you know, situation. And so that provided an incredible support network. So I think that you've got to find your micro community too of other entrepreneurs. And it's very difficult because you may be talking to your friends about what you're going through, but unless they're on the path of entrepreneurship, it's hard to deeply empathize and know what it's like. And so I think finding your community, destigmatizing mental health in general is something that's important. So maybe people that have had bouts of, you know, of depression while they're building their startups and they got through it, share how they got through it, and, you know, destigmatize what is kind of not spoken about are key things. But yeah, thanks for the question. It's a tough one.
Go ahead.
I was going to throw something in on the piece of mental health is that by definition, a founder who's creating something out of nothing has to be someone who's a bit irrational. And so it doesn't mean the entrepreneur is nuts, but like, let's be frank, we're all kind of crazy. Like we don't have all the cards like in our deck. None of us do. And none of us will even remember this panel, who are on this panel, how it actually happened. We're going to make it up. And then we're going to go to bed and we're going to wake up. We're going to make it up again tomorrow and the next day and then turn it into some fiction. And that's how we run our life. So we're all running on made up stories, period. That's scary. And so when we realize that as a baseline and then start to embrace that as a cultural narrative, it starts to make it okay to be like, yeah, I'm a little nuts too. And so it's actually important for like all of us in this panel to acknowledge that as we like live our lives, be like, yes, I can get my pants on straight today. And like, yet I'm still kind of like, things are a little bit off at times and I have bad days. And we've gone to the extent in our model and we've developed curriculum that we interview just a ton of people and we're like, hey, what are the areas of your life that you manage like weekly to make sure that you just don't collapse into a pile of flaming garbage on the ground? And so these are people who are like great parents, great leaders, great community members, and they've come up with 8 key principles, 8 core areas, and we developed curriculum around that and software and tools for our members to rate themselves on them and like daily reflections and meditations. And so I'm not going to tell you exactly what that is, but like do that work for your community. Like ask those questions and go to people who you respect and be like, let's have some real talk. Where you struggle busting. Because like, and then build a culture and a curriculum around that just for your community and like do small groups where people talk about it. We have like we have these small group gatherings where our community has one called the Great Eight. And it sounds like nearly cultish. It's not. Like, we're just founders going through the Great Eight, talking about like our struggles. And if you don't have that, it's only a matter of time till you see 1, 2, 3, 4 founders commit suicide, destroy families, do damaging things to their towns. Like, it happens. I've seen it all over the country, and it sucks. And so it does need to be addressed. It's a great question, but build a curriculum around it or something. Then it's not the answer, but it's a start.
Nick, I tossed up a link to Icona, which is the first mental health accelerator for entrepreneurs, founded by Dr. Freeman. He's a world-renowned psychologist focused on mental health for entrepreneurs. He's done work with Stanford, UC Berkeley, UC San Francisco. And in fact, to your point about how we're a little bit crazy, he's actually done research on the topic. And there's some very compelling data around that to support kind of what you described. So if you go to his website, he has some reports that he's put out where they've done a ton of analysis with thousands of entrepreneurs and kind of how mental health runs in the family in some areas. Obviously, it's not in every entrepreneur, but there are some kind of striking data points there. So just to add that.
Great stuff. Great stuff. Fabang, I saw you were about to say something.
Yeah, so from an angel investor point of view, what I do and a lot of the angels in the ASEAN do is that because we have portfolio, so we basically bring all the entrepreneurs together and get them to learn from each other. There needs to be that peer element so that the entrepreneurs can have friends around them to bounce back ideas and to ask for support. And not only within that particular group under one investor, but we also bring all the entrepreneurs from invested by all the different angel investors together into a startup night, and then they can get together and share with each other. And what's better is that because now we have a community of ASEAN angel investors, we basically help the entrepreneurs across different countries. So if someone needs to expand or go to Vietnam or to Myanmar or to Malaysia or to Indonesia, they know that there are angel investors in that country and entrepreneurs in that country ready to support them. So we create that culture of supporting each other, not only among the angel investors, but also among the entrepreneurs in our community.
Wow, thank you for that. Rocio, did you want to say anything? I'm going to go to this last question after you finish, and then we
like
have a last
collective
5-minute follow-up. Go ahead.
It's just about collective therapy or something like that, right? Because, but I truly believe that is the way of doing new businesses too, right? Entrepreneurs today are completely different to businessmen that used to, right? And for an old or a traditional businessman to talk about their problems, it was like inconceivable, right? It was, what are you talking, man? And today, the way of doing businesses and doing new businessmen, new businesswomen is completely different, right? So I truly believe that we have to redefine the word of business people in general because it's completely different. Now we are worried about mental health issues, but I truly believe that 10 years ago, nobody, or 5 years ago, nobody was talking about it. Nobody.
Yeah. It was
It's
almost like
a very
taboo,
recent
right?
thing, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like you have to be perfect, right? You have to do everything perfect. You have to always be right, and you cannot have problems.
Right.
And
And in
I believe
today's
that the way of doing businesses is different.
Yeah. And in today's society, after having a year and a half of a global pandemic, I think everybody needs mental health right now, right? We all need this one huge global woosah where everybody just get together and hug and go, like exhale real quick, right? So we'll go to this last question. Then I have a one-worder that I want from everybody. And I'd like you to think about, as you're about to answer this question also, what are some tools you would like the audience to take away that may not be relevant to your work specifically, but some type of tool. I know I just seen Brian put one in there about mental health, but come up with another one also that you would give to an entrepreneur to say, hey, this may help you. I really like that Nick was talking about those, that collaboration between the person who's not so sure and the person who's been burnt, right? And but whatever tools you like to give, if you can think of that, but while we answer this question. How do you build trust with IP and patent infringement being so relevant? In contrast, how can being a first follower be a path to entrepreneurship? Anybody?
I have a strong opinion on this that I'll
Mhm.
share, but
Go
I
ahead.
think too many people, patents don't guarantee you success, nor do trademarks. They only will protect your smashing success. So quit worrying about it, and understand most people really don't want your idea, to be totally honest. And if they take it from you, it's actually more of a curse, because the idea came from your eyes, your lens of how you see the world. And so drive and the grit to go through the days when being a founder, like Brian said, is completely emotionally draining. And so be more open with what you're working on. Truly, if you invented the perpetual motion machine and yours works, like maybe be a little more quiet about it, but understand this, there are tons of patents on perpetual motion machines. None of them work. So like, just that should be the last thing about patent protection in the stack of a successful ecosystem, but it should be in there. And if you're the facilitator at an event, just say there's a no asshole policy. Eat what's on your plate, not others. And like literally get that out there. Like set a culture of that. Like you don't steal other people's ideas. And if you do that, you're not welcome here. And like that should be said by the government. That should be said by the funders. That should be said by the founders. And it should be a common thing. And so when someone says it, it needs to be addressed. And like maybe you don't 86 them, but like deal with it.
And that's that building community trust too, right? That's a part of that, knowing who to partner with and building community trust. Go ahead, last comment if we can, and then because we only have maybe a little over 3 minutes. Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say +1. It was so well described that like it's exactly what I want to say. He just said it more eloquent than I would have. But yeah, I think it was really clear. And execution is everything. Is the summary basically. I didn't fully understand the last question, the second part of it.
Well, we won't go to the second part because we only have 3 minutes. And I want to give you guys time to give your shout outs and how people can reach you really quick. So we have on the clock 4 minutes. So if each of you can give one resource or one tool that you'd like them to take away, and then give how people can connect to you. So I'll start off with the ladies, Rocio.
Baby steps, guys. It's all about social capital again, right? It's all about confidence, cooperation, reciprocity, and that's the way how we build community. So baby steps. For a lot of people, it's not easy to start trusting each other. So baby steps. That's my first advice. And the other one is data-driven decisions, right? It's less guts and more data is very important for startups that are starting. Because they are just passionate and they get in love about their idea, and maybe nobody cares, as Nick said. So be careful. That's it. Baby steps and data-driven decisions.
Okay, cool. Further.
I think my one word would be the agile mindset. I think everyone changes along the way and changes all the time. You will run into problems and you will run into issues, and maybe your first idea will appear very different. The business model will be very different. Maybe the investors will request you to do something different, whatever. You will run into a series of obstacles and difficulties and issues and problems in front of you as an entrepreneur. So just be agile and learn along the way and change along the way.
Thank you. Thank you. Gentlemen, can you take about 45 seconds apiece if you can, please? Nick.
Be intentional about the environment you're creating and how they stack. Understand its compounding interest. So much like they're talking about in Vietnam, the pitch days without the other pieces led to results they didn't necessarily want. But be very intentional. Read Startup Communities by Feld and just knock everything off and build your own system around it. The other one I would say is have fun with it. Like it should be really fun. And you can get a hold of me at innovationcollective.co. But when I say fun, I mean it. If it sucks, no one wants to be there.
Thank you.
No, thanks for the invitation. It was really great to participate with all of you. And I would say give first. Just that's the mantra that I think. It's amazing what happens when you go out and create value for someone else. without expecting anything in return, it normally comes back tenfold. So that mindset, I think, should be at the heart of any community building efforts. And I think I'll tag on to what Nick said on the book. I would preface, though, Startup Community Way is Brad's latest book, which I think has some updated thoughts that I think are really kind of pandemic related. And there's a handful of other things that I think are really valuable. Last resource, I'll give a shout out to Arnorbio, who asked the question. He's got a book called Rebooted, An Uncommon Guide to Radical Success and Fairness in the New World of Life, Death, and Tech. I think that's a really, really amazing resource where it's got an incredible perspective on this kind of new world we live in. And so I would check that book out as well. But thank you to everybody for the opportunity.
Thank you, everyone. It's been a wonderful evening having you all as guests, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.